So, welcome to the Facilitation as a Sacred Opportunity session. And it's an overview of UU Wellspring's newest program as well, which is called Love at the Center. Love at the Center, UU Values and Covenants. Will be providing an opportunity for you to deepen your role as a facilitator in any small group ministry program. While we use our newest program, Love at the Center, UU Values and Covenants, as a vehicle for sharing and practicing ways to provide safe, spacious, and spiritually deepening sessions for participants. We feel it is a privilege to develop the skills to hold and nurture a small group ministry program. And we also realize that there are skills, training, and practice that can provide safer, more inclusive space for participants. And UU Wellspring wants to share how we have cultivated sacred space with you here today. Now, this session is similar to the new facilitator training that UU Wellspring is offering to participating congregations. We will be supporting you as you grow in providing witness to participants as they share while holding sacred space for their vulnerabilities. We know it is an honor to provide space for people to witness one another with their deep, true selves. Learning skills to hold this container is vital to making this deep sharing possible and for the transformation to come alive. Our goal is for you to leave here today knowing that you have embodied the message of facilitation as a sacred opportunity, and you have learned skills to take on a lens of sacred leadership. Now, one of the key elements of UU Wellspring is that our sessions almost feel like time out of time. It often doesn't exist elsewhere in our lives because we are fundamentally rushed so much of our days and in our lives today. We are so focused on productivity. We come to Wellspring groups to touch space and create all the time in the universe, almost like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon. Creating sacred space in our groups allows us to be more in tune with the way that nature flows. And before our participants introduce themselves, I'll introduce our facilitators today, who are skilled and experienced UU Wellspring facilitators and program writers. They all currently serve on the board of UU Wellspring, which is a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization. And we are affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Association. Sometimes a question comes up, are we the UUA? No, we're not the UUA, but we are officially affiliated with the UUA. So I'm Linnea Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of UU Wellspring. As a spiritual director, I serve many religious professionals. I've served as president of Labreda, and I've been an educator all of my professional life. I'm a member and the worship chair of the First Unitarian Church of Orlando, Florida. And the Reverend Sarah Goodman is a minister of the Unitarian Universalist Community Church in Glen Allen, Virginia. She has been a UU Wellspring facilitator there and at White Bear UU Church, where she served as assistant minister. She was a co-writer of Creating Meaning, one of our UU Wellspring Reads program that is a crossover program for adults, youth, and emerging young adults. And Sahar Musin Laufman has facilitated UU Wellspring's first BIPOC online cohorts and is a key writer on Love at the Center and our youth and emerging young adult program, Love Yay. Sahar is a Star King alumni with an MDiv and Master's in Social Change and consults with UU organizations on social justice, program coordination, and somatic well-being. So welcome to all of these board members who are taking their time out to be with all of us today. I just want to remind you that we do have a website that has all of our programs on it, uuwellspring.org. And our programs now range from the congregational year-long programs to shorter 6-session spiritually transforming programs. We have shorter youth and emerging young adult programs, the latest of which is called Love Yay. And it is shorter than our year-long Love at the Center program, but it's still 10 sessions long, but it's age focused for youth and emerging young adults. So you can bring this program to your congregations as well. When you become a member of UU Wellspring, you receive both Love at the Center as well as our foundational program called Sources as part of your membership. You can use either or both. It is your choice which one to use when you're a member. Other programs are also available with the shorter UU Wellspring Reads and Youth and Emerging Young Adult programs available without a full membership. So it's just the year-long programs that require membership. I wanted to show you this Venn diagram because many people who are familiar with Sources are wondering how Love at the Center is similar and different. And there are many similarities, how we reflect our soul sharing, the way that we're creating this sacred space. We have spiritual practices in both, spiritual companioning, small group ministry setting. There's deep listening, theology, purpose building, and UU identity. Those are just some of the similarities. Sources is a deep dive into the sources of our UU faith, whereas Love at the Center is a deep dive into the values and covenants of our UU faith. Sources on the right again, it includes sharing our whole spiritual journey early on in the program, and there's more UU history. Love at the Center has sharing and experiences and storytelling throughout the program in smaller chunks. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how Love at the Center is similar and different from our current programming, and hopefully you'll be able to offer both in your congregations. So now I would love to send it on to Sahar, who's going to help us deepen our facilitation skills with a community building activity while sharing how she holds space for participants.
UU Wellspring groups build community in a way that goes deeper than social events and covenant groups in most UU communities, and encourages engagement that deepens worship experiences and justice work in your community. People engage at an inner truth level, which some, like Parker Palmer, refer to as a soul level. What a gift. You, as the facilitator, will learn and practice skills in this session that will encourage a growing trust in your group to engage in spiritual deepening. We begin with the community check-in, which will include a reading, meditation, and an invitation of a sharing of what you are carrying in your heart in response to relevant topics for today's session. When we pause in life to consider our emotions in a shared and trusted space, we sometimes feel them more deeply in the sharing, which can both provoke and soften a trauma response. Encourage participants to share as each feels comfortable to share in the moment. So we'd like to invite our participants now to share their names, pronouns, and the role that you have in your congregation. Gloria, would you mind going first and then calling on the next participant?
Not at all, thank you. My name is Gloria Perez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am a lay leader in the church. I'm a spiritual director. I facilitate a social justice group, co-lead it, and facilitate a Soul Matters group. And I'm also facilitating a group spiritual direction little group in the congregation. And with that, I'll call on Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Pugh. I am Director of Congregational Life at the Unitarian Universalist Church at Washington Crossing, which is in Titusville, New Jersey. I'm also a spiritual director, and part of my portfolio is adult religious education programs that Wellspring is under. And I'll call on Kristen.
Hello, my name is Kristen Worthington. I am the Director of Lifespan Religious Education at Bull Run Unitarian Universalists in Manassas, Virginia. I also serve adult education, under which Wellspring is a feature, and have been a longtime participant in Wellspring myself. And then I will turn to Susan.
Thank you. I'm Susan Bennett. My pronouns are she and her. I am a lay leader at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax in Virginia. I'm immediate past board president. I'm the coordinator of the Women's Ritual Council, which is a women's pagan spiritual group that's been functioning for about 20 plus years. And I will soon be the lay minister for worship and arts.
Wonderful. Let's all take a moment to really thank ourselves for showing up today. And I want to share a reading with you and invite us to take a few minutes of silence following it. It's called When Someone Deeply Listens to You. When someone deeply listens to you, it is like holding out a dented cup that you've had since childhood and watching it fill up with cold, fresh water. While it balances at the top of the brim, you are understood. When it overflows and touches your skin, you are loved. When someone deeply listens to you, the room where you stay starts a new life, and the place where you wrote your first poem begins to glow in your mind's eye. It is as if gold has been discovered. When someone deeply listens to you, your bare feet are on the earth, and a beloved land that seemed distant is now at home within you. John Fox. Let's take some moments of silence. I want to invite you to slowly return to this space. Welcome back. When curating space for sacred facilitation, it's important that we get comfortable with silence. Silence is a cornerstone of a facilitator engaged in sacred space holding. It speaks to an internal receptivity and deeper grounding. Silence does a lot. Beyond clearing the mind and helping folks settle, it invites the quietest voices to have a place to speak. It lays the space for individuals who would otherwise not share to bring forth their gift. When you inject silence into a space, at times, more secret sadness or sweetness arises. A lot of people either struggle with silence or do not have the experience of holding or dancing with it. When you are ready, I invite you to answer the check-in question. What impact does silence, or the absence of it, have in the quality of the spaces you inhabit? Another question, when someone deeply listens to you, how does it feel? Or you can share anything that is present in your heart today.
I'd say that for me, in groups, whether I'm facilitating them or someone else is, that opportunity for silence really gives me a chance to check in with my deepest feelings. Without that, I think I'm too easily distracted by things. So I value it very highly. Thank you.
In addition to what Susan said, I find that silence helps me take in what has already been said and can give me an opportunity to feel how that resonates with me or not, but for me to maybe explore something in a different way if I've heard something new to me.
For me, silence grounds me. and helps me to know my authentic self and hear my authentic self. Um, I feel like Wellspring has been transformative in introducing me to silence. I was not a big silence person before I started with Wellspring almost 13 years ago. And now I crave it, and I think it's a really important part of my day.
So first, wow, I really agree with what Robin stated about it bringing me to my authentic self. And in addition to what the others have said, I have found that during in facilitating, silence allows for a break in the energy of what the prior person just said, so that each person's voice is equally as important, and that person gets to speak from their authentic self rather than what was just flowing from the person before them.
Thank you for your beautiful shares. And now that you've had a chance to center and check in, let's watch a 20-minute preview of Love at the Center, UU Values and Covenants, before Reverend Sarah Goodman lead us in more sacred facilitation opportunities.
Hello, facilitators, and welcome to Love at the Center, UU Values and Covenants. This preview will provide an overview of the program for you as a facilitator and share a bit about your role as someone who is going to be creating a sacred opportunity for yourself and others in the program. My name is Linnea Nelson, and I'm the Executive Director of UU Wellspring, and I am delighted to bring you this program. Love at the Center is a core foundation for spiritual deepening. Much like our Sources program, it is a first program to take in the series of UU Wellspring year-long programs. It is meant for small groups of around 10 people, and it is 13 sessions long. You may find that our other year-long programs are a bit longer and you need to get started right away in September in order to finish them by General Assembly in June. This program, you can wait and start in October. And in fact, in 2024, we're asking you to start in October, as this will be our first year of the program. It gives you September in your church year to go ahead and gather people and let them know what's happening. There is an in-depth exploration of our shared faith in this program. We will be looking at the values and the covenants very carefully, but we'll do it within the context of our personal identities, our experiences. We'll be looking at the diverse communities we all are a part of, and we will work to strengthen our relationship with the world. Love at the Center has 5 areas that we have grouped the values. We begin and end with love. We start with grounding in love, and the last session is transforming in love. The other sessions are clustered with centering in community, acting in faith, and nurturing growth. As a facilitator, you are creating a spacious opportunity. When you think of how seldom we have spaciousness in our lives, this is one of the things that you can do as a facilitator, is to provide and create that space. One way to do this is to enter the space that you'll be in, whether it's online or in person, early, perhaps even 30 minutes early if you're meeting in person. That gives you time to feel organized, make sure the room is ready, and do some centering of your own before the first person comes to the session. You will be providing a space that allows for deep sharing. And we will be reviewing how to do this in the session when we're all together. We will be learning how to honor one another and what we have to share. We will be learning how to include one another and how to respect one another. Much of this falls under deep listening, but that is such an important part of UU Wellspring that we will be spending some time on that in our first session, as you will be in your first session with your participants. I want to get a little more involved in the calendar so that you know what to expect for the year. So I mentioned we will start with love, so grounding in love. And the first thing that we will do is we will center in love. That will be the first session that you will facilitate with your participants. We will explore love through the acronym CARES, and I'm going to go through that in just a few moments. Session 2 is creating bonds. This is where we create our covenant. Please notice sessions 3 and 4 are both on the value love. The first session, session 3, we will look at valuing love, and we call that Love is Powerful. Session 4 will take the covenant statement that is paired with love, and we will explore that, and that one's called Living Shared Values. You'll see that pattern again when we get to centering in community. Interdependence and pluralism will be explored as values, and then in session 6, we will explore the covenant statements that are paired with interdependence and pluralism. You'll see that again in Acting in Faith, but this time there are 4 sessions in Acting in Faith. The first 2 are paired around justice and generosity. The second 2 are paired around peace and reason. Then we move to nurturing growth. And this is where we will explore equity and transformation. And we will also look at the paired covenant statements for equity and transformation. Finally, we're at session 13, where we are returning to love. And we feel that this is a wonderful place to explore how each person feels they've transformed during the program and to have some celebration and reflection on their experiences. Like in all UU Wellspring programs, we provide a very detailed participant email to the facilitators. In that email, you will take a look at the value or covenant that's under consideration that will be clearly stated. There will be resources. It might be links to sermons and videos and readings, poetry, music, all kinds of things. And then there will be reflection questions, some of which are specific and some of which are more general in nature. We ask that you as a facilitator do the same preparation as your participants, that you engage with all of the resources, and you also journal your answers to the reflection questions. You will find that as the facilitator, you maybe won't take as much time in the group to share what you're thinking. We want you to participate, but we also know that you have to limit how much time that you spend as a facilitator speaking to give more space to everyone else. You'll notice that in the participant email for the covenant section, we're going to be sharing experiences and storytelling prompts. So folks will know what it is we're going to be doing in the session. Sometimes you may find some history questions if there is a resource that is tied to the history of this value, and spiritual practices will always be a part of UU Wellspring. We're also adding optional resources. We find that many people who finish a session, it's just opened up a whole new world. And if people want to continue their exploration, we want to provide some resources that will be optional and not the ones that are discussed in the session. We ask that you open this participant email, copy it, put it into your own email browser, and then create a group for your cohort so that you don't have to type in the names every time into the email. It is just too easy to forget one person, and then they won't be prepared or they might not know your meeting. So it's very important that you create some kind of group so you can make sure everyone's aware of what the next session is. I also like to give the tip of creating the email for the next program before you lead it. So for example, if I just led session 3, before I go to the session, I will create the email for session 4. I'll have it open on my computer. I'll have it ready to go. And if someone adds perhaps a reading or they want to share a book title, I will put that into the email and I will send it out right after the session. As you remember, perhaps if you've been a participant, sometimes you just get so involved and excited in the actual theme and for here the values and covenants that you may want to get started on the next one right away. So that's one of my favorite tips. I'll give you one more tip and around the email, and that is decide how you want the subject line to read and try to stay consistent. So perhaps you say UUW and the date. And that way, when people are looking for the email a week later, they'll be able to easily search for it. I mentioned there are 2 kinds of sessions. The first is a value session, and this is where we look at the actual values and we give our own personal reflections and we reflect on Unitarian Universalism. We'll be asking questions, something like, how does this value show up in your life? And how does it show up in your Unitarian Universalist communities? Note that the next question in former UU Wellspring programs or other programs, we usually ask at the end, we say, so what? And what we're going to do here is we're going to embed those so what questions right into the program of reflections itself. So for example, we might ask, what are you going to do based on the reflection from today? What do you believe? What do you change? So we're going to ask you to journal about that as you are journaling about the other questions, so that when you get to the session, you've already started on that transformation. You'll find there might be some questions about history too, when there are resources that we feel are important to explore with this value. The second kind of session is a covenant session. And here it's very exciting because we really want to take it to this stage of embodying this exploration of our covenantal faith. So there will be resources and reflection questions, but they will be more brief because we are going to focus on experiences and storytelling in the covenant sections. So the experiences are often going to help us shift culture, and the reflection questions are going to help us understand systemic change a little bit better. And storytelling is going to be sharing our own lives with one another. And I will say one of the surprises is that often when we're telling a story about ourselves or something we've been involved in, we learn something new about it each time. We will give the prompts for the experiences and storytelling ahead of time. We do ask that you journal your own storytelling so that you can get to the essence of it. There won't be time to share long stories in each session, but there will be time, and it will be encouraged to share a brief anecdote and the essence of the story in the session. What we hope for this is that instead of one long spiritual journey, which you've already done in sources, or you will do when you take sources, we want to have this opportunity to take a look at different aspects of our lives and share them with one another in smaller segments so that we can engage with them with one another. Of course, spiritual practices, and these will land in the covenant sessions as well. Now, for facilitators, you will go to our website, uuwellspring.org, and you will log in by going to Facilitator Login in the menu and choosing Love at the Center. Then you will put your password in. And if you're thinking, password, where do I get the password? The way you get the password is you sign up as a facilitator, you register. And that link can be provided to you by your congregational coordinator, or you can contact me. And it's also actually on our website. You will fill that registration form out. Please only put in one program that you are facilitating. If you're facilitating more than one, we do ask you to fill out more than one registration because they're tied to the password for that particular program. So once you have filled out the facilitator registration, you'll get the password as well as other information about how to access the materials, kind of a review of how to get online. And then you will type them in. Notice that there are some little gray dots there already. Ignore those. You will type right over them. The password is not already there. So then you will submit it. When you submit the password, then you will be brought to the sessions. And you'll notice that the arrow is pointing to session 1 because the first session is facilitation as a sacred opportunity. That's the session that UU Wellspring will lead, but you are always welcome to take a look at it and see what we're going to be doing. That is perfectly fine. But when you choose the session you're in, for example, session 1 for the first session, it will open and it will first have the email that you will cut and paste and send to your participants. Make sure you always read through it carefully because there are places where you can insert your own calendar, your Zoom link, your room number, other information that is unique to your particular group. Then at the bottom of this same link, you will find a guide for you as a facilitator of how to facilitate the session. In that guide, you're going to find that the words that are typed into the program are things that you can actually read to your participants. And you can read them straight out, but our guess is that you will probably read them and paraphrase them. That's what we hope you feel comfortable enough to do. So the facilitator tips is going to be a blue line, and notice that little arrow. When you click on it, it becomes a down arrow, and you will have tips about that part of the session that will pop open for you. We ask you to read those throughout. They change with the actual activities. And we think that these will be helpful for you. And yet they're things that won't get in the way of reading or paraphrasing the words that you want to use with your participants. We are using a CARES acronym. C is for community, and this will be familiar to those of you who've been in Wellspring before. It is an opening reading. It has music and meditation, which can be silent. And then there's a check-in. And this time the check-in is going to be a more specific question that is tied to some of the exploration of the value or the covenant statement in this session that's coming up. So that is one small change. We don't have a general question for check-in. We have a more specific one. The A in CARES is for agreements, and this is our covenant. And we know that there's some wisdom around waiting until you've been together at least once to write your covenant when you're going to be together for an extended period of time. So we're going to work on covenant in session 2, but know that there's a part of session 1 around identity that will be brought into this understanding of covenant and writing of our covenant in session 2. Our goal will be inclusivity, and that's why we feel it's important to look at our identities and share openly about what we need from this group. The R is for reflections, and these are our questions, and we will have an opportunity to share our responses, usually not to all the questions. So that's why it's also important for you and all the participants to spend some time journaling to each of the questions, because all of them will provide new ways of looking at your spiritual life and bringing you from your head to your heart. But we won't have time to explore all of the questions in depth. As a facilitator, you may find that you get to one question sometimes. It has brought such a need for the group to really explore it deeply. As the facilitator, when you bring a question forward in the group, you will be asking for deep listening, which we will explore in our first session. So your participants will explore in their first session and be familiar with what the group is going to commit to as far as deep listening and honoring silence. When you ask your question, if you feel that everyone needs a second go round to respond to it, it will take longer. If you find that everyone gives their response and they're ready to move on, then you can choose another question. You don't have to go in order, and you don't have to do all of them. I just can't reiterate that enough, because that gives the spaciousness of the group. So you as a facilitator can create this sacred opportunity because you are really listening to your group and you are thinking about what their needs are as a whole. And that's how you will choose the questions to ask. The E is for experiences. And as I mentioned before, this is a newer part of the program. There are both pre-session and in-session experiences. And these might be something that we ask you all to do before the session starts, or it might be something that we do in the session together. Our goal is to have a broad range of the senses used, and so that we feel that we are embodying whatever the value and the covenant statement are asking of us. The S is for storytelling. Storytelling is going to be more anecdotal telling. You might write a whole story in your journal in response to the prompt, but when it comes to the session, we are going to be asking you to focus on the essence of your story. So what was the learning? What is it you want to share? Knowing that you'll add some details about the story, but you won't be able to give the whole thing. We want to have the opportunity to reflect individually on each person's story and see how that adds to perhaps our own story. Also part of storytelling is affirmations and our closing words. We're excited about our 3 books, Beyond Welcome, Faithful Practices, and Sacred Nature. All of these are currently available from the UUA bookstore, and also online retailers and as ebooks. Sacred Nature is often available in libraries as well. You may find that if you have a fund for your adult programs or some discretionary fund, sometimes you can buy these in bulk and offer them to your participants. Your participants and you will hopefully be engaging in spiritual direction, and so you may want them to spend any funds that they have on spiritual direction, or they may have a spiritual friend, and then there's no cost to that. But we'll talk about that far more in the sessions themselves. We really appreciate the feedback that you give us. We ask that you put the feedback at the end of a session. There's a submit a comment area. This comment only goes to UU Wellspring. It is not printed on the website. It is a place for you to put in anything from, we had a great session and somebody brought in a poem by some particular person. We thought you might want to consider it for future UU Wellspring programs, or for this particular session to add to it. You can tell us that it didn't go well, some part of it didn't work for you. That would be helpful to us. You can also tell us maybe there's some theological piece that you want to go deeper in, or there's a broken link or a typo. Really, it is the place to tell us anything, any kind of feedback that you can give us. I will be back in touch with you, sometimes not right away, because sometimes we have to consider the comment, decide how we can handle it. Sometimes it's a comment that I want to bring to the next UU Wellspring board meeting, and it's lifting up some larger consideration. Please be in contact with me, director@uuwellspring.org, or go to the uuwellspring.org website. Check out the Facilitators Toolkit, because you will find that there are many resources there for you. I look forward to seeing you in the Facilitation as a Sacred Opportunity session, where we will be really delving into this program. Thank you.
I hope that love in the center is as exciting to you as it is to me. And now we'll move on to talking about deep listening. Deep listening is absolutely one of the core reasons that UU Wellspring is so successful. When we feel deeply listened to and understood, our connections to each other and to our topic is much deeper. And it may not come quickly or easily for you or those in your group. to listen deeply. Hopefully, once you're familiar with the benefits and we're all familiar with it and have an opportunity to practice, it will become more comfortable. We can know that listening is important, but until we feel fully embraced, held by a loving community that is holding us in silence, we may not be able to value the importance of being wholly listened to and how holy it can feel. So here's your first chance to listen deeply. Listen as I read the portion of A Chalice Lighting by the Unitarian Universalist minister Eric Walker Wickstrom. It can be found on the UUA worship website, and Reverend Wickstrom is an author in one of our books, Faithful Journeys. May we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. And may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May we be the example of listening to feel, hear, know, and change ourselves and the world. Listening deeply to one another means that we will not interrupt, give advice to fix, or respond verbally to others while we're participating in the group. No, this doesn't mean that you're a robot sitting, not responding. Rather, you'll be listening with your whole body, responding naturally. For example, if someone says something funny, you will, of course, chuckle or smile. If someone says something sad, you will show that you're feeling sad with them, being fully attentive. You might find yourself naturally putting a hand to your heart, but only if that's the natural thing for you to do. The challenge as listeners is to remain silent and fully attentive without interrupting the speaker's flow. So we'll practice this deep listening by meeting in pairs for 7 minutes to give each person 3 minutes to respond to these 2 questions, with a minute to settle in and determine who will keep time first. As a listener, you will listen without responding verbally. The first task, of course, is to decide who will speak first. You'll have 3 minutes, and we'll hold a silence in between speakers. If you don't use up the full 3 minutes, sit in that silence, allowing it to be with you. This will invite the speaker to continue if they think of something else to add, or for both of you to let those words of your speakers settle. This is another opportunity to practice that holding that holy silence. So here are the questions. Linnea's adding them to the chat box. What do you need in order to feel deeply listened to? And where in your life do you or have you experienced it? Let's take a few minutes to share what was challenging or affirming about listening without interrupting, affirming, or asking questions.
I feel like I wasn't evaluating. I was just letting it come to me and hear it.
Mm.
Yeah. There's an openness of letting something come in without having judging it or making a determination. Wow, was that a silly thing to say? Or, whatever. Like, no judgment. Very affirming.
Mhm. Yeah, I really appreciate being able to stop thinking about myself
Mm.
because that's kind of relaxing in a way, because I spend a lot of time, thinking, am I doing this right? And so I find that very affirming.
I find it affirming that there's not a right answer in the process.
Mhm.
So, what was challenging or affirming about speaking without being interrupted or affirmed or having people ask you questions?
My thought is very similar, that there's no right answer. In this case, it was two human beings sharing, just sharing.
Mhm.
A little bit challenging was I like having follow-up questions to know that the person's listening. But I let go of that.
In some ways, there's a little bit of a challenge in, am I making any sense? Is this person really thinking I'm saying anything that's worth listening to?
I think for me, the affirming part of it is the space, where, it's not like it's not necessarily an expectation, but this is a space where I'm supposed to share something. And that kind of helps me get over my natural introverted tendency to not be the person who shares.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges and affirmations in this process. Thank you for sharing yours with us. For all the years that I have facilitated UU Wellspring, staying in our bodies and in our hearts while exploring the topics together makes the programs spiritually enriching. To that end, we intentionally create experiences in most of our sessions to engage other aspects of our being and promote this enrichment. It'll be familiar and comfortable for many UU Wellspring participants to intellectualize the topics presented. But the facilitator's role is to encourage participants to speak from their hearts. Yet this is not always easy. We also invite you to intentionally choose not to share deeply in order to distract people from their own sharing, but to share something that will spark the sharing we're hoping for. I'll model this when we engage in this experience in a few moments. The components of these sessions are experiential, and they serve to shift participant awareness and allow them to experience a deeper meaning. It's often this deeper meaning that allows participants to integrate new information into their lives and into the lives of their communities. This is how UU Wellspring can change lives. Now, before you facilitate these experiences, each one is different. So you want to make sure to read them thoroughly, including any facilitator tips offered, and prepare all materials ahead of time, music or other props that you might need. Give yourself permission to breathe deeply into the experience. Let it move your heart as well. So let's share an experience today. Today, our experience will be Lectio Divina. I will read Love is the Center and the Foundation as Lectio Divina, and which is also known as Sacred Reading, using these steps. First, I'll ask you to listen as I read the text aloud, and we'll pause after each reading. Next, I'll read it again aloud, and this time listen for a word or phrase that stays with you or seems to have special meaning. Finally, we will pause before I read it a third time as we give you the text for you to follow along. Now, on this reading, note what feelings arise in you. So then we'll pause again at the end for everyone to quietly reflect. So, our first reading, Love is the Center and the Foundation by Sherry Woodbury. Again, we ground ourselves here in our highest values. Love is the center and foundation of this faith. Love is the power that holds us together as a community. As we enter into this time together, then, let us open our hearts to the healing power of liberating love. Because love is not only something we receive, but something we practice in community. We let fall away all that might distract us from the wholehearted practice of love. Let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. As we continue to listen and learn, to act and grow, may each unfold in wholeness, both deeply loving and truly loved. This time, when I read it aloud again, listen for a word or phrase that stays with you or seems to have special meaning. Again, we reground ourselves here in our highest values. Love is the center and foundation of this faith. Love is the power that holds us together as a community. As we enter into this time together, then, let us open our hearts to the healing power of liberating love. Because love is not only something we receive, but something we practice in community. Let fall away all that might distract us from the wholehearted practice of love. Let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. As we continue to listen and learn, to act and grow, may each unfold in wholeness, both deeply loving and truly loved. When I read it this third time, note what feelings arise in you. And then we'll quietly reflect one more time at the end. Again, we reground ourselves here in our highest values. Love is the center and foundation of this faith. Love is the power that holds us together as a community. As we enter into this time together, then, let us open our hearts to the healing power of liberating love. Because love is not only something we receive, but something we practice in community. Let fall away all that might distract us from the wholehearted practice of love. Let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. As we continue to listen and learn, to act and grow, may each unfold in wholeness, both deeply loving and truly loved. As we come out of this silence, think of a word or phrase that you would like to share, a word or phrase that resonated with you and maybe how you connected to the reading. Take another couple deep breaths before we share.
I would love to share actually. And what really came up for me was reground, but also like again, and also like practice. And it was this feeling of like a baby who's learning to walk that stumbles a lot. And then up they go again, and up they go again. And that kind of gentleness of holding the self to the discipline, as it says, the practice of doing this love thing. Yeah, that's what stuck out for me.
The phrase, love is the power that holds us together as a community, is very grounding to me. It makes me feel I have a place that where I can be strong, because I'm grounded in this power. It's what keeps me together. And then toward the end there about both being loving, something I can do, and being truly loved. It's a reciprocal thing. So that I'm feeling I can extend and act out of love, and that love comes back to me.
What resonated with me was love is something that we practice in community. That the importance of that, it's not something we can do by ourselves. We have to be in community to really experience that. And that's that's what keeps me in my congregation in spite of, disappointments and all the things all the ways that we sometimes injure each other. That practice in community, that we can continue to do that, and that love sustains us through that process.
For me, the phrase, let us open our hearts to the healing power of liberating love.
Mm.
I feel my chest being open, and there's a little vulnerability with that, but then there's the healing power. So it's safe and it's a balm, and I can do this. Of the healing power of liberating love. So I feel an expansiveness.
So what first caught my ear was let fall away all that might distract us from the wholehearted practice of love. Because of my own spiritual practices, which revolve around yoga practices, that it's there. It is at the center of us, and we just have to move things that get in the way is a very real thing to me. But what really, the following sentence, let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. And I was trying to create a little bit of emphasis on what caught me is that it's not automatically received, and we don't automatically give it often enough. It's there, and we have to move the distractions, and we have to actively practice love.
These are beautiful reflections. Thank you. If you are to take up doing Love at the Center, you'll do the same activity in your first session with your group. So it's a very cool opportunity to experience it as a participant. Hopefully, participating in Lectio Divina will allow for you to move beyond an intellectual response, and it certainly seemed like it for us. So thank you for sharing, and now we'll shift to facilitating storytelling with Sahar.
Thank you. Faith holding is essential to facilitation as a sacred opportunity. And when people don't have enough faith in the container, having the ability to redefine its edges is part of calling people back to the space in their wholeness of being, So boundaries consistently help people feel held and secure. And at times, folks will push them to ensure that they are solid. This setting and holding boundaries compassionately allows for a cohesive space for all to do their work. We live in a world where we all have to interact in environments where we cannot fully express ourselves, ones where we have to wear masks. This gets so normalized that people are often struggling with a narrative of scarcity, believing that there is not enough strength within to let the sadness out, not enough empathy and compassion outside to be truly held in their wholeness of expression and experience. And as long as you think you don't have time for your feelings, you won't feel them. Conversely, when people know that they can bring their full selves forward, they tend to. Facilitation as a sacred opportunity is a feedback loop. Modeling embodied vulnerability invites the same in others to come forward. In that understanding and intention, you have an accountability and responsibility to be open to trust, teaching both yourself and others how to be known to one another, grounded in the belief of interdependence, challenging the depreciating narratives by holding space and showing vulnerability as a process of reconditioning. Repetition is like a mantra, a way of being with one another that is more sacred and soft than limiting belief patterns that we are alone and unsupported. Taking time to step back allows us to recognize the nuances necessary for creating containers of deep sharing. Look to our past and sharing stories on the times and ways facilitation has worked, and imagining changes for the times that it didn't will help us to better explore these nuances. That's what I want to invite you to do. I'm going to invite you to tell me a story, to share an experience with facilitation. It can include ones where facilitation was like a sacred opportunity. And remember to include how you felt. And in the case that your story includes facilitation that lacked that level of integrity, I want you to imagine if you could change the experience. How would you change the quality of the facilitation to improve it? What components were missing or needed?
And I've had a little time to think about this, so I'm going to jump in with an experience of leading a group online. It was a Wellspring group, and during the check-in, someone shared something that was deeply troubling for them and their family, and the rest of the group held that space so beautifully for that person. But afterwards, someone in the group said, that felt very odd not to comment and really let that person know how I felt. So we asked the person, how did it feel to share something so deeply personal and challenging with a group that only responded with maybe someone putting a hand on the heart, but being very attentive? And the person responded that they couldn't wait to tell this news to their Wellspring group because every other single person and group they shared it with had big responses and didn't allow them to really feel deeply what it was that was happening in their life. And they didn't feel they had to explain further than what they needed to say. They didn't have to answer a lot of questions. They didn't have to make sure we all felt okay. She was just held. And so that helps me when it's hard to not do the crosstalk where we're like asking each other questions and advising in general conversation. That always happens. It reminds me how important it is to have a space to just bring your story forward and know that people are holding you in love, and that's more important than battering you with questions.
Thank you so much, Linnea. I also have one that comes to mind. And I've definitely been in spaces where I don't feel like this beginning of the container, like the check-in, is part of how the container is held. And I feel like there's a story, like you were saying, that's just on my heart. And it takes me so much longer to fully settle into the space because I feel like it wants to be heard. And when we have a space where immediately we can say what is the most present to our hearts, I feel like more fully present. Like, um, and another one is actually welcoming. Like, I've definitely had people go into logistics really quickly, but not into this, again, heart-based sharing. And yeah, sometimes that's been really difficult for me because, yeah, so and that's my share.
I think for me is to have a participant that's very much in their head and doing my best to model and model vulnerability, model feelings, and over time magic happened. And over time, without me, I had kind of said, okay, this is just a head person. It's going to be hard for them to think like this. And no, over time, they became a huge proponent of Wellspring.
I don't have a single story to share. I kind of have an ongoing thing with a Soul Matters group that I facilitate is modeling. I can model for them the heart thing of whatever the theme is that we're talking about. And they had a very hard time in the very beginning to go to that. They're very much in their heads. And I'm getting frustrated. As we've gone along, I see in them, I don't know if it's me or if it's them, but I see a type of, okay, they're talking about a feeling here. They've made, I don't know if they realize that they've made a connection here, but they're talking more about a feeling, and it's not just the intellectual piece of whatever the theme was. And I think that was more of a growing experience for me, understanding them, where they are in their not wanting to be seeing the heart stuff, but really are seeing the heart stuff.
I had an experience when I was first engaging in feminist spirits circles, where we used active listening, people speaking one at a time without interruption or comment. And for many of us, it was sort of the first time that we had done this. And it was very challenging, for some people more than others. And I mean, there was one woman who literally had to put her hand over her mouth to stop from commenting on other people's sharing. And I watched her as we went through, and we did shared facilitation, right? So there would be different facilitators each time. I mean, we took turns, went around. And I saw her as she went through this process. It took a long time. And there was a period when I thought, this is like, I don't know how this is ever going to to work. You know, I don't know how she's ever going to really be part of this circle, but we all like we hung in there with it, because we all felt like we were practicing, you know, something new. And I remember the day that she came in and said, I think I finally get it. I am, when I share in this circle, I say things that I didn't even know that I felt or believed. And there was like this recognition from everybody in the circle of like, yes, and isn't that an amazing, I mean, it doesn't happen every time, but sometimes something comes out of you and you go, oh, now I understand, now I understand something about myself that I didn't understand before. It's very powerful. Simple, seems simple. Not simple, not easy, but very powerful.
Yeah, I think the most clear thing that is coming up for me right now in response to this is the the challenge to the facilitator to just model the patience of getting from session 1 to session, 5, 6, 7, when it does start to resonate with the group. I feel like I've had some negative reaction, maybe those first couple sessions when you redirect by repeating the question or simply sit in silence when there is a question that's not part of it, or when conversations start occurring and you need to stop the conversation and bring it back into the process of individual sharing and deep listening. But again, also, if you can have the fortitude to just stay where you are, it is that like session 8, 9, 10, where you begin to see everyone else's light, everyone who is not the speaker, and their eyes start lighting up with all this recognition of drastically different viewpoints and merging together somehow and appreciating it. So that's the challenge, is the being the stillness that you're asking everyone else to participate in.
Thank you all so much for sharing. Such an honor to hear your words. Linnea will now share how you can learn to engage in spiritual practice and spiritual direction with UU Wellspring during GA.
Thank you, Sahara and all. I'm going to do just a moment of inviting you to really what the rest of the sacred facilitation is all about, where we talk about spiritual direction and spiritual practice. And we have collaborated with the Unitarian Universalist Spiritual Direction Network, which is uusdn.org. And we will be collaborating with them over 3 days. In fact, Robin's going to be a part of that. Day 1, we will do this preview of Love at the Center, not as a facilitator, but more for participants. The second day, we will really delve into spiritual practices, which is a big part of all Wellspring programs, and all the richness that comes from having a regular, intentional spiritual practice. And the third day, we'll be talking about spiritual direction, which is familiar to some and very unfamiliar to others. And we will talk about that process and how it can really parallel your work in UU Wellspring and other walks of life in Unitarian Universalism. So we invite you all to those programs. When you are in UU Wellspring at Love at the Center, if you choose to do that, many of the things we did here today will be part of a facilitator workshop that if you're used to UU Wellspring, the first year, usually we have a retreat for everyone in the cohort. So the facilitators and the 8 to 10 people who are participants in your congregation. And for Love at the Center, we're doing this facilitation training, which we will do multiple times during the year so that facilitators will have this sort of experience before they do their very first session with their participants. So I'm wondering before we end today, if there are any questions that you have about Wellspring, about facilitation, about anything we did today, anything you're curious about or wondering about for your congregation or your next choices, let's just take a moment, see if there's any questions out there that you have.
I have a question. Must someone have been a Wellspring facilitator before they do Love at the Center? Or I guess it's two-pronged. A facilitator, or even must they have participated in Wellspring?
Great, thank you for asking that. You do not have to have participated in any Wellspring program at all to be in Love at the Center. And to be a facilitator, because we have this facilitator training, you don't have to have either facilitated or participated in a Wellspring program in the past. So anyone can do Love at the Center. We know that some congregations, since the membership includes both Love at the Center, this program, as well as Sources, our usual first-year program. Some people have taken Sources, so they're ready to take something else, and this will be another program that people who have already participated in Wellspring programs can take. And I think we'll find that a lot of people want to do this coming year since we're focusing on values and covenant statements.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do the groups have to be part of let's see, does the congregation have to sign up to be receiving this opportunity?
Yes, and yes, as if you're doing it in your congregation, you can do it in person, you can do it online, you can do a hybrid program if you have some online, some at home, or some in person. But the way that we price it is based on the size of your congregation. If you are 300 members or smaller, the cost for the year is $300, includes both Love at the Center and Sources. If you are 301 members to 600 members, then it's $600. And if you're 601 members or over, it's $900. Because we also know that a congregation with 900 people, probably they're going to have 3 or 4 different groups, and a very small congregation may have one. So we're hoping that that makes it equitable for everyone. However, we also have many cohorts of online groups starting this fall. We have a religious professionals group starting in August, and the other groups I think start end of September or October. There's a clergy group, there will be a lay group, and there are 2 seminarian groups. We have partnered with the Ministerial Foundation Network, I think that's what it's called. And we offer UU Wellspring programs, especially to those seminarians and interns who are not part of one of our seminaries, UU seminaries, so that they have an opportunity to come together as well.
Lene, I have a question for you. Is Love at the Center a base workshop just like Sources is, so that if a participant, okay, I'm seeing nodding heads, takes Love at the Center, they can move on to additional programming without taking Sources? Okay,
Correct.
nodding heads. And then, so I'm wondering your suggestions on offering both Sources and Love at the Center. How do you see that working in a rotation? What are your suggestions there if you're
Sure.
keeping both?
Yeah, many congregations offer Sources, have offered Sources every year, and then they add one advanced program and they kind of rotate those. And there are, I think, larger congregations, or if you think you have 2 groups and interest in both, you could offer both every year, or you could offer every other one. Just know that Sources is a little more intensive in that it's 20 sessions long plus the retreat. And this program is 13 sessions long. And so for some folks who are like, I'm just not sure if I can do the full 20 sessions, 13 might fit them better. And then, of course, we have our 6-session programs for those who maybe want to, just get a little bit of a start, or maybe they've taken 5 years of Wellspring and they want a little bit shorter one. So we've tried to create it in such a way that you can choose which programs are going to meet your needs and your congregation. And you're always welcome to check in with me and say, well, this is what our congregation has done. Do you have any ideas for our congregation, how we might move forward next? I also know that congregations who've done it for 2 or 3 years usually have some kind of steering committee, maybe 2 or 3 people and a staff member who kind of plan it out, because it can get a little complicated if you've done it for many years and you have some people saying, oh, can we do, faithful actions again? I really want to do that. And you're like, well, when did we last offer that? Have somebody keep track of which programs you offered when. And it's great to keep track of who's been in them, because then when you're looking for facilitators for the future, you can look back at the lists of people who participated in the past. But all of our programs are meant to be, the way that we provide the programming online, we try to make it so that someone who's never done it before can just really read through it and do it as they go. And someone who's done it many times, like I won't tell you how many times I've facilitated Sources, but because it's different every time with every group, I still pretty much stay to script. I might not have to read it word for word, but I do all the pieces because they have been, they've proven that they've helped make a successful group experience.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, thank you all for participating. I hope to see you at our cohort. If that interests you, we'd love to have you join us there too. And I look forward to supporting you throughout the year in Love at the Center or whichever UU Wellspring programs that you decide to do this year.